Hello, welcome back, scholars of British literature. This is Masterpieces of British Literature 1, English 3327, Section 1, and I'm Mr. Dr. Long. And in this video, I would like to introduce you to the poem Beowulf and go over the outline or form of the whole poem, discuss some of a little bit of the background and the circumstances of the poem, and then I would like to look at the sound system of the poem of Old English and introduce you a little bit to Old English and make a case for why we should take that seriously. And I will do that. Okay. The author of Beowulf, the question of who the author of the Beowulf poem is an interesting one, because what we're talking about is the written text was probably written down in the early 8th century of the Common Era, early 700s. And the author, this is the first time Beowulf is written down onto paper. That doesn't mean the poem didn't exist in some form before that. In fact, it probably existed in an oral tradition for maybe hundreds of years, passed down from generation to generation. People would memorize the poem, recite it, they would teach it to somebody else, and that person would be the official reciter of that poem. It made it long enough for someone in the early 700s to write this down. This is an important question because the person who wrote it down, the author of Beowulf, was probably Christian, because we have references to God, we have references to heaven and hell, we have references to the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible Genesis, story of Cain. The first main villain of the poem, Grendel, is referred to as a descendant of Cain. And that's a very important theme in this poem. What is Grendel's motivation for his violence? How should we treat Grendel? Is he just a force of nature, right? Or is he human and culpable for his actions? What is the nature of Grendel? The poem is considered one of the earliest English poems, but its characters are not English. They are Scandinavian. It is a poem about two tribes, the Gates and the Thanes. And they call themselves there's the Danes and the Gates, and we have our current nations of Denmark and Sweden. We might have, some of these characters might be representatives, early representatives of those Northern European regions. This is really intriguing because our language comes clearly from somewhere else other than England. It came from somewhere else. It was originally a Germanic dialect, and that Germanic dialect gradually became something else as it interwove with people speaking other languages. And that's the way all languages work. That's what happens to all languages. The former outline of Beowulf, the poem is over 3,000 lines long, 3,182 lines. And what I'm going to do is go through the different sections of the poems by line section. So line 1 through 85 is the prologue. It gives us a description of the rise of the Danish nation, particularly the Shieldings, the descendants of Shield, whose ancestry is given in this section. From lines 86 through 188, we have Heorot, the depiction of the event where Heorot is attacked by Grendel. Heorot is the mead hall, the big building in which Hrothgar has his retainers and his basically his knights or his small army, and it's where Grendel attacks. We get the depiction of that event. From lines 189 to 490, we have the hero of the poem Beowulf coming to Heorot. He hears about the travails of Hrothgar and Heorot, and he, as a point of honor, he decides he's going to come there and help them rid them of this terrible problem. From lines 491 through 661, we have a feast at Heorot. This is important because it gives the poet a chance to have speakers recall past events, because that's what people did at feasts. They recited past deeds. Very important. Of course, everybody drinks lots of mead, honey-based alcoholic beverage, and they go to sleep. And of course, Grendel takes the bait and he attacks. So we have lines 1251 through 1382. The attack. We have from 662 to 835. We have the fight with Grendel. I don't want to give too much away there, but Beowulf does not kill Grendel. He tears his arm off. So Grendel gets away, but he's terribly wounded, and they hang Grendel's arm on the wall of Heorot. Doesn't kill him. We have after Grendel's arm is torn off, we have lines 836 through 1250, the celebration at Heorot, and we have lines 1251 through 1382. We have the second attack, and the second attack is by Grendel's mother. Female character, female monster, but maybe even a more formidable foe to humans than Grendel was. We have Grendel's mother. Lines 1651 to 1798, we have another celebration at Heorot after Beowulf fights Grendel's mother, and that is a very sensational description, because he has to go to great lengths to kill Grendel's mother. After the celebration at Heorot, Beowulf returns home, and that is depicted in lines 1799 through 2199. And after that, we have about a 50-year pause. There's a 50-year gap of time. And of course, over 50 years, Beowulf has risen to lead his own mead hall, his own group. And he, of course, is the protector of his group. And he's the provider of food for his people. But in the second half of the poem, we have his final greatest challenge. A dragon awakens, and the dragon awakening is given in lines 2200, 2200 through 2509. Dragon wakes. Lines 2510 through 2820, Beowulf attacks the dragon. He does what he has to do. He goes into a battle he's almost certain to lose, attacking the dragon. He saves his people, but he's killed by the dragon. A very interesting end. Lines 28-21 to the end of the poem, and gives us Beowulf's end, including his funeral, the funeral eulogies by everybody. So this is very important. Very, very interesting form to this poem, because we have great deeds followed by a third great deed that ends in failure. We don't have the the hero winning the game at the end and being celebrated as a live hero. We have the person going to his grave as a heroic figure, right? Well, I want us to reflect on this, because what we have in this form, if we imagine the form, we imagine the first part of the poem deals with two heroic events. Grendel's mother. Beowulf defeats these two figures. Then we have in the middle this 50-year pause. And in the last part of the poem, we have a third event, heroic event, the dragon, right? And it's interesting because J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of the Lord of the Rings series of books, who is also a great medieval scholar, made the argument that the total form of the poem reflects the form of each line of the poem. Because each line of this poem, and this is a poem written in alliterative meter, meaning rather than rhyming at the end of the poem, or rather than the lines being composed of stressed and unstressed syllables, ta-dum, 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 what we have are lines determined by repetitions of consonant sounds. That's how we define what alliteration is, a repetition of the same consonant sound. And so each line it's a regular repetition of an initial consonant sound twice, and then there, in the middle of the line there's a pause, and this is known among poets as a caesura, and that same consonant sound is repeated in the second half of the line. Okay. What I'd like to do is look at a side-by-side comparison of the Old English, of a passage from Beowulf in Old English, and Seamus Heaney's translation of that same passage in modern English, because I want to see if you can get a sense of how this sounded, how this alliterative verse sounded. Okay, I'm going to let you pause. I'm going to pause and let you open that document so you can look along on the document as I attempt to read this in Old English, and so you can get a sense of how it might sound. Okay, welcome back. If you have that document opened up and you look at the second page of the document that I uploaded for you guys, I have on the second page of that the Old English letter translations, and you can see these on page 30 in the Norton Anthology, Volume A. If you got the 9th edition, it's on page 30, but it gives you some of the letter translations from Old English. The letter that's represented by an A and an E together, really close together, represents the vowel, a short vowel sound for A, like you would hear in cat. So the AE represents the A sound. The letter that's peculiar to Old English is called a thorn, and it looks like a P with a little tower hanging up, sticking up above the top of it, or a backwards B with a little tag or a slash through the top, through its top. And both those represent the sound like a TH sound. They can be either voiced or unvoiced. And for this passage, the spelling the spelling SC together represents the sound shh, like you're telling someone to be quiet. Shh sound. So here's some examples. The examples: that, you have the thorn AT, thousand, You have the thorn followed by thousand. Sixth, thin, wither, background, appetite, at, hammer. You kind of get the picture. If we look at the first page of this side-by-side document, on the right-hand side is Seamus Heaney's translation of the Old English, and on the left side is the Old English translation. The first word of Beowulf is wait. We don't pronounce the H. It would sound like wait. Wait. Seamus Heaney translates that as so. But I like this notion of a poem beginning with wait. It's almost like saying, you could almost translate that as listen. And we use the word listen sometimes for the same reason we use the word so, as Seamus Heaney does, to kind of get people's attention. Listen, wait. Wait. We gardene in gir dag thelt kinnige thrim gefronen utha ethelinges eilen fremmeden oft shield schiefing skithna thretum monagam mechem vom moda sittla oftia och sådda ärla sitten arrest weird. Fiskift funden he thas frofra gebeid. Wex under woknum worth mindem tha. Åther him egwille för im sittindra offra honreda hirun solda. Gomben gilden. That was good kenning. Seamus Heaney translates this as, so, the Spierdanes in days gone by, and the kings who ruled them had courage and greatness. We have heard of those princes' heroic campaigns. There was shield, chieftain, scourge of many tribes, a wrecker of meat benches, rampaging among foes. This terror of the tall hall troops had come far. A foundling to start with, he would flourish later on as his powers waxed and his worth was proved. In the end, each clan on the outlying coasts beyond the Whale Road had to yield to him and begin to pay tribute. That was one good king. That was gold king. That was gold king in Old English. I wanted to read a poem. In Middle English called a section from Piers Plowman by William Langdon, because William Langdon uses the same alliterative verse where he's repeating these consonant sounds in a line to establish a line. And once again, he has a caesura, he has this pause in the middle of the line, so there's a kind of swinging feel to each line. But I wanted to use this because it is in Middle English. It's a little bit easier. We can kind of see modern English coming through here, but at the same time, I wanted to give you a sense of how the Old English first would sound. Again, I've got a screenshot of this on the film script that I gave you guys. Ik zei je toer aan het hoofd, trelijk je maakte. A deep dal beneath, a deep dal beneath, a dungeon therein, with deep ditches and dark and dreadful of sight, a fire field full of folk, found either between, of all manner of men, the mean and the rich, watching and wondering as the world asketh. I'm going to repeat that line again. A fire filled full of folk, found I there between, of all manner of men, the mean and the rich. Notice you can just barely begin to see recognizable modern English poking through. When you look at it on the page, it's a lot easier to read than listening to me. When I read it, it doesn't sound anything like modern English. But you can, on the page, you can see that modern English, that recognizable English poking through. At the same time, Langland does this superb job of capturing the sort of percussive musicality, that insistent physicality of Old English poetry. It's plosive. You have these bam, 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 bam. It's percussive. It's not smooth. It's not fluid. It's sort of like, it's like beating on a drum or beating on someone's skull. I always try to teach the sounds that Old English and Middle English make, because I feel like if we ignore how their poems sounded, we miss, I think, over 50% of the appeal of the poems and what they communicated. I really feel, especially with Pierce Plowman, what I just read, it might come as a surprise if you've read translations of Pierce Plowman that the poem had that very unique sound like that. That percussive sound, the repetition of those consonant sounds in each of the lines. Okay. I put a link up to a very, very interesting video on Beowulf by BBC produced, created by Michael Wood and produced by British Broadcasting Company, called In Search of Beowulf. You don't have to watch the entire film, but it's a very, very intriguing explanation and coverage of Beowulf. And in that film raises some very interesting questions, and I wanted to just throw these out for you. Number one, what do the characters Grendel and Grendel's mother represent? I kind of brought this question up earlier. Might they represent a sort of real-life equivalent of an existential threat to contemporaries in England during the time period this was composed? Are they an allegory for something else, some other kind of threat, some natural threat? Number two, is this a pagan poem with a Christian veneer? Is the Christianity painted on the outside of it, or is this a fundamentally Christian poem? Did the translator of the poem, the author that wrote the poem down, did he successfully turn it into a Christian poem? In other words, did audiences at the time enjoy the poem as a pagan poem and simply accept it as its Christian elements, as decoration, or did they enjoy it as a Christian poem and treated the pagan elements as a reinforcement of its Christian themes? Number three, is this a Christian poem that uses previously pagan narrative as a way to convey its message? Is it a Christian messenger who is using Beowulf and the appeal and the heroic traits of Beowulf as a way to reinforce Christian values. And number 4, do the Christian and pagan elements ultimately contradict or cancel one another? I think this is a very important question. Is this poem in competition with itself? Are the Christian elements undermined by the pagan elements? Or are the pagan elements undermined by the Christian elements? These are questions I want you to think about. I might ask you to write about them, but I do want you to think about them. Again, you have my script that you can look at. You can look at the questions at your leisure, think about them. You might even write some answers down, write your thoughts down as you read the poem. But if you're having any trouble understanding the poem or any trouble with any of the assignments I put up for this class, please email me slong2@central.uh.edu. I appreciate your patience, and I hope you have a wonderful evening and enjoy your reading. This is a really wonderful poem. Just allow yourself to be immersed in it and enjoy it, and I will communicate with you later and put new assignments up. Have a healthy, happy evening. Thank you.